So we're here with Andrea Ferro of Lacuna Coil. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very happy to be talking about this old new record.
Right. Obviously, you all probably were already asked about what went into making this. How did you decide to do it? Other than
Basically,
obviously, this was the 20th anniversary of Comalies. So,
yeah, basically when we knew that the year was coming of the 20th anniversary, we could have done just a remaster of the record and
mhm.
just, when you do a remaster, what happens is that you basically compress the files, the audio files, and make it sound louder. That's all it happens when you or maybe you repackage the album with a slight different design, but that's what happens. So for such a special record, as Kamal has been our breakthrough record, the record that was the most important record back in the first part of our career for sure. We decided to do something a little bigger for celebration, and so we decided instead of just remaster, you do go back and rework the song, rearrange them, re-record them, and sort of bring the sound of Comalies and the essence of Comalies into the sound of the band in 2022, like in the last couple of records, like Delirium or Black Anima, and try
Mhm.
to use the same lineup, the same kind of approach we have now to the old songs, and see what was the result. It was a bit of a challenge for us and also for our fans as well. Because when you go back and touch something so important, it's always risky. Because people might hate
Yeah,
it, just the idea.
yeah, just
but
blasphemous
that's
for some.
we know. Yeah, exactly. But we knew that was like that. But since we've always been a band that kind of look forward to the next thing we do, we don't look back so much. So we decided to do it in and anyway and try to see what we could come out with this. What kind of record could come out. And actually, we're pretty pleased with the result. Obviously, it's a different era now. You can't have the Comalies back in 2002 was a complete different kind of record, innovative and different and new for many people. While nowadays is more, as I say, of an experiment we've done. Obviously, it doesn't have this, it can't have the same role as a record.
Right, right. It was a bit weird seeing you touching your best record, the one that it's hard to see it being any improvement on. So, for example, somebody else would have recorded like your first album or the EP because those maybe when you recorded them you didn't actually have the budget for it, and maybe those would have benefited from an actual re-recording as compared to the final product that's um, I think in 100 years from now, that will still be the most listened to Lacuna Coil album.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's not the one that sold the most. Actually, Karma Code, the next record,
Mhm.
sold much more than the call in terms of record sales or many spins that the single had or something
Mhm.
like that. But definitely will be always the most important because it's been the first one to bring the name of the band out there, internationally, especially in North America. And so the success of the band went from the local gothic metal European band to the
Mhm.
international touring and record sales band. So obviously, it will always be the most important, first very important record in our career. But we also rearranged some of the old songs actually when we did the 119 show, which was a special show we did in London for the 20th anniversary of the band. We also play songs from every release, from every record, and we went back and rearranged some songs from the first EP,
Mhm.
a couple of songs from the first EP in the way that could fit better the set list. We didn't record them in the new version, but we rearranged them. And when we play live those songs, we play them in the newer version. So obviously that would make sense, but also to challenge ourselves and to do the Kamala's 20th anniversary. It's been also important for us because we go back. We when we recorded the original Kamala's was in analog, was on tape, and not
Mhm.
digital. So we don't have all the files with the separate tracks of the keyboard and stuff like that. So we had to go back and listen carefully what was going on in the songs. Back then we had two guitar players, so there were different layers of guitar than the way we do now. So it was helpful for us also to restart working on music, especially after 2 years of the pandemic. And we say, okay, we go back, we take something, we don't have to rewrite the lyrics, but we can sort of rearrange the song, experiment a little bit with the keywords, with the sounds. And so it's been very useful for us, besides celebrating the 20th anniversary, but it's also been useful to go back to in the studio and work on some music without the same pressure you would have on working on a complete new album, you know. So it was a combination of different things that makes the record useful for us.
And revisiting this, is it something in the way that you used to do songwriting back then that you think now that you're revisiting it could influence the way that you're going to go forward now?
I think so. I think so because doing this job of going back, re-listening, and we also understood why that record was so special back in 2002. You know, why people liked it so much back in 2002, and so that gave us some inspiration that we probably gonna take and bring into the next album when we're gonna start working on the next album, which I think is gonna be next year, basically in the beginning of the new year, most probably. So we're gonna definitely have also a starting point from the feelings we had from this Comalies atmosphere, you know.
Right. So back when I first started reviewing, that was before I worked for Metal Storm. I had a blog, and it was around the time that Dark Adrenaline came out. So that is the Lacuna Coil album for me. Even though obviously I could see that Comalies was the biggest record, the one that had the songs that I like the most. But because of that's when I started reviewing. That's when I got into the album. I could listen to it all over again instead of just listening to the songs that I liked. That's the one that has the biggest connection for me. So
I like Dark Adrenaline too. I think it's a very good record and one of my favorite of the ones we've done. But as you say, when you have a band like us that we've been around over 2 decades, 25 years, whatever, obviously there's different moments of the band history where we express different kind of records, and with different importance as well. And so a lot of people, maybe people a little older, like our age, or a little younger than us, they find out about the band with Comalies. But a lot of younger people, they found out with the band with Delirium or with Dark Adrenaline or with another record. So it's not the same for everybody. Obviously, the majority of the band find out about Lacuna Coil with Comalies for sure. But nowadays it's so then very often we got people that come to us and say, "Oh, my favorite record," or Delirium is my favorite record, because they know the band from a different times, and they weren't there when Comalies was becoming this big success and gothic metal was developing into something else. They weren't there because they were too young, or they weren't paying attention, or they were doing something else. So these people, a lot of people come to us nowadays and they don't say that Comalies is their favorite record or their most classic record. We know it is because we obviously been there all the time.
Yeah, obviously. It depends a lot when you have your first contact with the band, because that's usually the one that gets its imprint on you. Do you think there's any song on any record that you feel like you would want to revisit live, but now that you're at this stage in your career, making a set list is very, very difficult?
Yeah, definitely there are some songs that I would not redo, but slightly rearrange for maybe we will do for just for the live shows. We're not gonna do we're not gonna do this work for every record because it's a lot of work, Yeah. We wanted to do it for Comalies, a celebration. Actually, the actual physical product, we'll have both versions of the album. We'll have the new one and the old one as well, the classic Comalies, just to say that this is a celebration, this is an experiment to celebrate the music of Comalies. But we're not going to do this for every record, obviously. We wanted to try and do it with this record. And I think it's cool to have done it in this way, but we're not going to do it for not for Karmaco 20 years, not for Dark Adrenaline 20 years, obviously. But when you go to do the live show, maybe it makes sense to slightly rearrange some songs to make it fit better with the rest of the set list. And so that is absolutely possible. As I say, we've done it on the 119 show with very, very old songs. So that's possible, but not because we don't like the songs anymore, just because, you know, the band progressed. We have a slight different lineup now, slight different sound. So it makes sense to make it fit even better, you know, but not change it completely, obviously.
Yeah, plus you're no longer the person you were in your 20s or even earlier.
Exactly. Nobody is, you know, very often we are a musician, but we're also listener of other bands, you know, so we understand the attachment to a certain record, and you know, we are fans of other bands as well, just like everybody else. And so I understand the point of view of the fans, but I think the band artistically has to follow what comes, you know, what the inspiration, where the inspiration drives you. Otherwise, you would be fake, you know, and people recognize when you try to do a record just to please the people. You know, the record has to please the people, but has also to please you as an artist. And if you don't do this, you're not going to be honest. And people always recognize that when you're not honest, when you try to make something just because you have to put out another record, another single, another, you know, you need to follow the inspiration of the moments, you know.
How old were you when Lacuna Coil got started?
Well, let's say probably 21, 22, something like that.
What was the scene like in Italy back then?
It was very, very underground, and practically it's kind of still is, you know. When there's more bands now, there's a bit more different styles of band, but back then there were those 3 or 4 more known bands that were doing a little touring around Europe or festivals, but very little. And then the most of the bands that were demo level bands, you know, just demo, play the local bar or the local small club, or the squat, you know, something like that. So it was very underground metal. Rock was bigger, but metal was very underground. Beside the Iron Maiden or the usual Metallica, Slayer, okay, those were big as well, obviously. But it was locally, it was very underground. Not many bands. Unlike a country like Germany, for example, which always had big bands since the 80s. You know, they had Halloween, they had Creator, they had and later they had Rammstein, they had Scorpions, a lot of big bands, or Sweden, Scandinavia, or the UK or America. They always had big bands, you know. But Italy, I think more like Spain, France, Greece, we never had the same level of bands, popularity for bands back then, you know. The end of the 90s, beginning of the end of the end of the 90s. Yeah.
Right. As far as Italian music goes, I was always very impressed with how strong the progressive rock music scene was, like in the 70s, where not only the community, but also the bands. How much of that did come into influencing the scene in Italy?
Prague has always been very, very loved in our country. I have to say that after the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, it's been tough for that kind of music because obviously, like everywhere else, the mainstream music started to become popular, like the pop stars like Michael Jackson, Madonna, and they start to take the charts. And it was hard for those bands because those bands in Italy, they were very connected to the political situation from the student movement, you know, the left wing movement. So a lot of those bands, not all, but most of them, they were connected to the university protest and all that stuff, you know. So it was a movement inside the movement, you know.
Yeah,
and
quite
it
like
was
the
hard.
anti-Vietnam thing in the USA.
Exactly. And so it was hard to take it out of that and bring it into the 80s with the pop music explosion, you know. And so they kind of, very few resisted, you know, in that era. But the culture is always there. I mean, those bands are always loved. Maybe the younger generation, they don't know about those so much, you know. But I think in Italy, even a band like Dream Theater, for example, has always been very loved, very much loved in Italy. Everybody that goes down that more like Porcupine Tree, Dream Theater, those bands are very, very, very loved in Italy. There's still the culture of a more sophisticated music, you know. And I think also, even if we're much simpler kind of band, but we also use a lot of layers in our music that I think it's kind of inside us, you know, even if we don't try to sound like a prog band, but there is a little bit of in our taste that comes from that. I think it's inherited in your own blood, you know, somehow in your ears.
Naturally. I mean, it would be interesting to hear like a 15 minutes Lacuna Coil song.
Yeah, I mean, never say never. I mean, as I say, we follow the inspiration. I think nowadays it's hard because even 7 minutes is hard nowadays, because
Mhm.
it's we've done a couple of songs that 6 maybe minutes or something like that, but it's hard. But I'm not excluding one song you can do it. If it's one song on the album, why not? It doesn't have to be 4 minutes all the time. But it has to make sense.
Mhm. Right. So as I was going back to the 2012 album, where that was the album I reviewed, for some reason after that I didn't get to check out the Lacuna Coil albums on release. So even when I did, they were like the album I would put in a playlist along with the new releases. So I wasn't very familiar with the new records when you were announced that you were going to play in Romania at Art Mania like 2 or 3 years ago. So when I
Hmm.
saw them, they were kind of very fresh to me, and I was very, very surprised, especially in regards to your harsh vocals, because the way you did your vocals before they were cleaner, and now suddenly they were
Hmm.
harsher in a bit of a metalcore way. How did that change come to be?
Basically, I started singing growl vocals, like death
Hmm.
metal kind of vocals. Even in our demo, I was or still singing in that way. And then with the development of the music, we got a little more less, let's say, less extreme, both on the drums and the
Hmm.
vocals. And so we decided just to follow the that kind of distorted but not really extreme vocals. As I said, when we changed the lineup in Delirium, on the record Delirium, we got a new guitar player, a new drummer. We felt that we were becoming a little different band, because we've been with the other guys for so many years. We had our sound, our more or less way of working. Without those guys, the way of working, it was only the three of us, basically. Me, Marco, the bass player, which is the main songwriter for the band, and Christina. And so we kind of felt we were working only on our way, following only our direction.
Yeah, you were
And
getting
in this
comfortable.
way, we felt like the Marco was coming up with a lot of heavy riffs and double bass parts. And
Hmm.
so we said, I mean, why don't we just follow the music? Why don't we just, if it's a double bass part, surely fits better with the screaming vocals than with just the melodic vocals. And plus we will always add the big epic chorus from Christina anyway. So that, and some slow song will be there anyway. So we say, why don't we just push on the things that we like, and we just push the double bass, we push the riffs, we push the vocal, and it just naturally became something we could use, and we tried, and people really loved Delirium. And it was a breath of fresh air for us, because after so many years with the same people, with the same sound, it was a bit more refreshing for us, it's sort of a reborn,
Hmm.
and so we say, why not? We try and see if people like it or whatever, and we do it because we like it, and then people embrace it, and so we say, that's good. We can now push as much as we want. Obviously, there are limits. We're not going to do a full death metal record or metalcore record, because it wouldn't make sense for us, because we do have our signature sound, and we try to bring those elements even if we change a little bit the style.
Oh, you could do a
But
death metal
definitely
song.
we can do a song exactly which is a bit more extreme. Why not? I mean, we're very open to follow what inspiration brings.
Hmm. Okay, so then the next record will be half death metal, half prog.
Maybe, yeah, it could be. We can become Opet, old school Opet.
Mhm. Well, now that they're not doing it, their lane is free.
No, I mean, there will always be a Lacuna Coil sound, obviously, because we've been around so many years, but we feel more open to experiment for sure, different
Mhm.
directions.
Do you think there's anything left on your Lacuna Coil bucket list?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always so many different things that you never done. Like we've never done a soundtrack. We will always wanted to do a soundtrack, even
Mhm.
for a movie or a game or video game. But it has to be a complete sound, and not just they take one of our song and they use it. That happened already, but something that we write specifically for a
Or
soundtrack.
yeah.
That would be
Mhm.
something we would like to do. And then there's so many big tours we would like to do. We would like to play with Iron Maiden or Metallica or Rammstein. There's so many band Korn, like so many different bands we would like to tour with. So that there's always new things to do, And two of the band members are very young, so they never done as much as we've done. So they need to
Mhm.
catch up with us.
Yeah, naturally. If you could get any living director to direct a music video for a Lacuna Coil song, who would it be?
That's a good question. I mean, we asked Rob Zombie to do one of our
Mhm.
videos, not now, but back in Broken Crown, like let's say 10 years ago, more or less. And he was up to do it, but then he couldn't do it because he was filming something like I think the Halloween remake or something like that. So he didn't have the time to do it. Otherwise, obviously, there's so many greats. And probably being Italian, but Martin Scorsese would make sense because he's classic Italian cliche, you know, of the mafia movies and all the
Mhm.
things of the American Italian. So maybe that could be interesting. To be honest, I think anybody that has a great idea would work, either famous or not famous. We don't care much about that. It's very hard to find somebody with a fresh approach and a great idea. You know, we've tried different people, like more established people, younger people, and it's hard, you know, because obviously it's they have to fight with the budget all the time because obviously the budget for video is not as big as used to be in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, you know, when videos were on TV and not just on the internet, you know. So you have to find the right idea with the right budget, with the right location, but we always try to use different people to see if we can make it better and more interesting.
Mhm. I also noticed that, especially the core of the three core members of Lacuna Coil, you don't have a lot of side projects, even though ones that
Mm-hmm.
you do are either old or was that ethereal pre-Lacuna Coil band. So if you didn't have to take into account like time and resources, and you could start a side project, what would it be like?
I have two probably that I would like to do. One is more extreme, it's more like a hardcore band, like
Hmm.
hardcore metal, hardcore, something like let's say Hate Breed,
Hmm.
something like that. More into the hardcore, but a little bit more metal. And then maybe another project would be something more acoustic, maybe
Hmm.
something a bit more not country, but more acoustic rock stuff, like more southernish,
Hmm.
something like that. But I would have to find somebody that I mean, as you say, it's hard to find other band members and dedicate time, people that really will to participate to the project. So that's one of the reasons why we don't do many other projects is because you have to find somebody that really want to dedicate the time and it takes time to do it's a lot of work, you know, plus we have to manage our own band and it's a lot of work also to think about the touring, the business side of things, you know, because we're also a small company, so we need to take care of all the stupid stuff that you have to do to survive, you know, and to make the count right, you know.
Right. And also, if you could get any non-metal band to suddenly do a metal record, who would it be?
A metal record. I think if it's a more of a modern metal record, I would say Depeche Mode,
Mhm.
because I think they influence a lot of metal bands in especially for more modern approach like Linkin Park or that kind of band. I think they've been a lot inspired by Depeche Mode. Or if it has to be more classic, ooh, that's more classic. Maybe I don't know, some maybe some Andrea Bocelli, like some lyrical operatic singer that can do a metal record. I don't know, or somebody younger that do the same thing, you know, the same
Mhm.
approach. That it would fit for a power metal kind of record, probably.
And that would be interesting. It reminds me of the time that Manowar did a song with Orson Welles of all people. Yeah,
Yes,
he was
yes,
on
yes,
doing
yes.
narration on one of the tracks. And the Depeche
Yeah.
Mode thing could work. I don't know if you listened to it. The one of the members in Cult of Luna collaborated with John Peterson from uh, Johan Peterson collaborated with the Perturbator guy who does synthwave, which is obviously very
Okay.
influenced by Depeche Mode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I think Depeche
something
Mode
like that
has
could work.
always I
Mhm.
think Depeche Mode always been there for metal. Is the band that metal guys that don't want to listen to metal, they will listen to something like Depeche Mode, I would think.
Mhm.
But they've been very influential, even for us. I mean, they've never been like our favorite band, but we always like their song. We cover Enjoy the Silence, obviously. So we have a lot of respect for their do because they have so many good songs along the way, many years. You know, it's like a band like Cure, Depeche Mode. Those bands are like timeless. You know, they become classics and they had so much quality along every record that it's impressive.
Mhm. And most of these classic bands, like you mentioned, The Cure or Queen or whatever, those are usually bands that even though they're not metalheads do listen to them, but they're kind of in the rock sphere. Whereas Depeche Mode, they're not something you could call a rock band. And there's
Yeah,
very, very little bands like this that are not rock, but are still very beloved by, universally beloved.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's maybe REM could be one of those, but it's the same as a rock band anyway. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Or
they're
ABBA.
definitely not so many. ABBA, yes, ABBA. We used to party with ABBA when we were recording the old albums. Valdemar, our producer, he was a super fanatic of ABBA. So every time we were going to his house, he was playing ABBA, and we were drinking beer and then dancing
Mhm.
to ABBA. Singing. Yeah, he's a super ABBA fan.
And I've heard quite a lot of ABBA metal covers, usually power metal.
Yes, usually it fits with power metal, I think. But I think Alba always had great songwriting.
Mhm.
Every band that has, even if you take Michael Jackson, it's probably a typical example for metal. This stars, they always had great songwriting. That's something that like Prince, Michael Jackson, even Madonna, even in different levels, but they always had great songwriting with other people. Obviously, they wrote with other producers or other people, but they always had quality in the songwriting. Elton John, like all these guys, they always had quality.
Mhm. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna do this show in Milan the 15th of October for Comalies called Coma Live, where we're gonna play the old record and some other songs from the band. And then we're gonna go on tour in Southeast Asia and Australia in the end of the year, November, December. So check out lacunacoil.com to see the dates. And then next year we're gonna start working on probably on the next record, and we're gonna play some festivals. So we're gonna see you around in the summer for sure.
All right. See you around. And we're not going to quote you on it, but we're waiting on the 15 minutes Lacuna Coil song.
Maybe. Never say never.
All right. Cheers.
Bye. Thank you very much. Ciao. Bye bye.
Ciao.